All right, this week, see, Nigeria's stock market has had its ups and downs at this point, seeing the way it's played out so far. But I guess it might be a positive week. We've seen gains, we've seen losses, and market sentiment has responded to corporate earnings, economic data, and global cues. Let's break down the key movers, sector performances, and what it means for investors. Going into next week, let's talk to Abiodun Adedotun as a trader, First Securities brokers. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, laddie. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're seeing the earnings rolling in. I did spotlight FCMB, Boer Foods, and we also had Como Oil register this morning. Talk to me about what you've seen play out so far when it comes to most of these earnings.
Yeah, thank you very much, laddie. It's pretty much been in line. Investors already anticipated most of these things. By Q3, we saw the Q3 numbers, and the run rate has been pretty much steady. The thing there is that where do we go from here? These are the questions, and what type of corporate actions is going to be coming after these earnings. These earnings are still guided. I see based on guidance, they will still have to go for audit and whatnot. So investors are still playing it a bit safe, but going forward, where do we go from here? That's what's playing in the minds of most investors.
Right, and looking at the last trading week of January, I guess the month really ran fast this time. How do you describe the month of January trading?
It's actually been mixed, I think the very first 2 weeks there was a little bit of aggression. Of course, it slowed down, and it's been this week has been more like lukewarmish. As at yesterday, the ASI was about flat for the week. Today, it's looking like it's a bit up, but we are not seeing so much. Everybody is still asking questions. There was a lot of gains booked in 2025. Can these companies continue to sustain this momentum, say by Q1? So, what type of corporate actions are they going to be expecting? On the banking side, there is forbearance on some banks. These are questions that are also, weighing on investors' mind. And before you make that further leap, you need to be sure that it's going to be very, very rewarding.
Right, and definitely we're going into the trading month of February. What are you expecting? What do you think is going to drive sentiment?
Of course, earnings, corporate actions. Would expect that will begin to drive sentiment, and we'll begin to see more of the interest. And of course, policy direction, MPC, what the MPC will be doing in February, the direction of the economy, and all the economic data will drive direction. So these are critical for the month of February.
All right, we've been seeing a lot of action, when it comes to the global commodities market. We're seeing gold, even though it had that big drop yesterday, but recovered, some of those gains, but it's still trading at all-time highs. About $5,400 to $5,300 per ounce. Do you have your clients talking to you, asking you about gold at this point?
Of course, who would not be thinking about gold? The order of the world is changing. A whole lot of things happening from the U.S. side of things based on the current presidents of the United States, and quite a number of emerging markets already weighing their options. You understand, away from the dollar and things like that. So the only thing is for any investor is to say, I need a safe haven. Gold, with gold, you can never lose the bet.
Right, and definitely, how can investors here, have they been able to get exposure to that gold market? Do we have ETFs, tracking gold here in Nigeria?
Yes, we have one ETF called New Gold. Of course, we've seen a bit of demand, but they are not so much traded because, of course, liquidity is very, very tight in that space. But we've seen a bit of demand here and there.
All right, and definitely looking at the Naira, it seems to be kicking off really bullish in January. Did see that big gain yesterday. So official window 1.3 level, 1.4 has been broken so far. How do you think this is going to shape investor sentiment in stocks?
The strength of the naira, it's more like you're giving bigger purchasing power, to the people. And when you get bigger purchasing power, it tends to drive consumption. So pretty much when it drives consumption, I'm going to look at what will people really look at, the hierarchy of needs, food, clothes, shelter. So companies or industry sectors speaking to that are things we should watch out for.
And definitely, come back to the earnings at this point. We have a lot of investors out there that don't really know what to look out for, when they see some of these earnings reports. And definitely, investors always react maybe to a beat or not, when it comes to some of these earnings. What do you think investors should be looking out for? Like a novice investor here that's looking at most of these financial reports and don't really know what to make of it or the next action to take when it comes to that stock?
There are a few key metrics which anybody can easily calculate. One of the easiest one is price to earnings ratio. So the easiest way is to look at the financial statement and say what is the EPS, earnings per share of this company, and how much is the PE ratio, which is the price to earning ratio. So the simple calculation is if a stock is earning 1 naira and the price is 10 naira, just divide it, and it takes the number of years it will take for you to be able to recoup that investment based on earnings. So the lower it is, the PE ratio, you understand, the better it is for you.
All right, and looking at some of the latest earnings now, the likes of Boa Foods, I guess when you look at the bullish side of things, profit before tax that rose by 88%, profit after tax 91%, revenue that rose 18%. There's also lower finance costs and a stronger looking balance sheet. But the bearish part of it, we're seeing operating and distribution costs that rose. Cost of sales, that's increasing, and it seems they're still exposed to currency and input costs risk. But 2025, that was the year the naira was quite stable, and now we're seeing the naira strengthen in 2026. Do you think investors should be worried about when it comes to cost of sales rising, looking at some of these reports?
Not so much, especially for the consumer goods, not just Boa food, for the consumer goods. They should do a whole lot better, because with a stable FX, they will be able to plan better. And if FX continue to strengthen, they'll be able to give more to consumers in terms of pricing, and consumers will be able to take more advantage in terms of demand. So not so much. Sometimes you might see a little bit of, spike here and there in some one or two cost element. It doesn't really mean, it's bad for the business. Sometimes you might need to cut a little bit of margin on cost side to be able to get better volumes.
All right, so looking at the sectors that we track, oil and gas, consumer goods, banking, insurance, industrial goods, what do you think which sectors do you think investors should, be looking at when it comes to this Q1 and, most of the earnings, coming out at this time?
I think it's very, very critical for investors to pay attention to the consumer goods. Also pay attention to what's coming out from the telco side of things, MTN in particular. And you can't, of course, the market is always, or the economy basically is always run by the banks. But in that order, I think it's very, very critical.
So looking at consumer goods at this point, do you think investors will be encouraged, by some of the earnings that they see, like the likes of Boa Foods now having a profit before tax up about 88%? Do you think other consumer goods giants there could replicate the same type of performance?
It varies. In terms of replicating, I don't think so. But some of them are coming from position of recovery from what happened in 2024, where they made a lot of losses due to FX costs and constraints. So you continue to see that recovery being amplified. As at least you look at companies like your Nestle, your Nigerian breweries, and you begin to see those numbers, maybe PZ and a few. You begin to see those numbers, you understand, doing a whole lot good.
All right, then looking at oil and gas, definitely we've seen the oil markets, a lot of yo-yo movement. There's been the range trade so far. We kicked off the week strong, with oil prices almost getting to $70, but we're seeing a pullback at this point. What do you think is driving sentiment there, and how do you see that, affecting oil and gas stocks in Nigeria?
There are so many things, the time of the season, oil prices, usually there's a lot of, consumption when it's summer, kind of. So it's not important to, it's not surprising to see this yo-yo movement. For the oil and gas companies, I think they'll still do well, especially those ones listed, for those on the upstream side, Aradel, your Sepla, they'll still do well, but in terms of they are still trying to ramp up capacity, that should offset, any marginal move in the near term. But, on the local investor side of things is, will it be able to match returns in the local currency? If FX continue to strengthen, you might begin to see a little bit of decline. So the jury is still out on that.
Watching out for that. But what are you seeing for the TGIF trade today? Are you seeing a green close?
I expect a green close.
All right, we'll definitely be watching out for that. Thank you so much, Abiodun Adedotun, as a trader at First Securities Brokers. Thank you.
You're welcome.